Jewish Audio Bible. Translated by Rabbi Chaim Miller. Narrated by Dan Leonard. Produced by Rabbi Yisroel Bernath. The Torah portion of Vayeishev. At first glance, this parsha seems to have a most inappropriate name. Vayeishev means settled. And yet in this parsha, we read the most unsettling event in Yaakov's life, the disappearance of Yosef. In fact, at the beginning of the parsha, Rashi writes, when Yaakov sought to settle in tranquility, Yosef's anger against his brothers sprang upon him. So how could a parsha that speaks of Yaakov's upheaval come to be known as Yaakov settled? In truth, however, Yaakov's request for peace and tranquility was eventually granted by God, as we find that in Yaakov's last 17 years he lived a peaceful, comfortable life in Egypt. It's only that when Yaakov sought peace, God wanted to give him a more sublime peace and tranquility than Yaakov was yet worthy of. Therefore, God sent him the ordeal with Yosef in order to challenge Yaakov and thereby uplift him spiritually to the level at which he would be deserving of the greater peace. And that is why our entire parsha is called Vayeishev, settled. For in this parsha, we read of the ordeals which God sent Yaakov to elevate him spiritually to the point where he could live a totally harmonious life in this world as well as in the next. Yosef angers his brothers. Chapter 37. Yaakov settled in the land which his father inhabited, the land of Canaan. These are the episodes of Yaakov's descendants until they were finally settled. Yosef was 17 years old. For many years previously, he would pasture the sheep with his brothers. He would do boyish things like curling his hair and touching up his eyes to look attractive, and he spent his time with Bilhah's son and Zilpah's sons, the sons of his father's wives, whom Leah's sons had treated disrespectfully. Yosef used to bring reports to their father of all of Leah's sons' behavior, which he thought was evil. Yisrael loved Yosef more than all his sons because he was a son born to him in old age, so he made him a robe of fine wool. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, and they couldn't speak with him nicely. Yosef had a dream and told his brothers about it, and they hated him even more. This is what he said to them. Please listen to this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the middle of the field, when, look, my sheaf stood upright, and it kept standing too. And then, look, your sheaves gathered round and threw themselves down in front of my sheaf. His brother said to him, Does this mean you want to reign constantly over us? Or rule us all the time? And they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his evil reports to their father. Yosef yet had another dream, and he told his brothers about it. He said, Here I have dreamed another dream. Just look, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars threw themselves down before me. He then told it to his father, in the presence of his brothers. His father rebuked him in order to calm the brothers down. He said to Yosef, What is this dream that you have dreamed? How could I, your mother, and your brothers come and throw ourselves down to you on the ground when your mother has already passed away? But his brothers still envied him. His father, however, believed in the dream and kept waiting for the event to occur. The sale of Yosef. His brothers went to pasture their father's flocks in Shechem. Yisrael said to Yosef, Aren't your brothers pasturing in Shechem? Come, I'll send you to join them. I'm ready, Yosef said to him, even though he knew his brothers hated him. Yisrael said to him, Go now and see how your brothers are doing and how the sheep are doing, and bring me back news. So Yisrael sent him off to the Hebron valley, and he came to Shechem. The angel Gavriel, in the guise of a man, found him, and look, he was lost in the field. The man questioned him, saying, What do you want? Yosef said, I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they're pasturing. The man said, They've left here. They're not acting like your brothers anymore, for I heard them saying, Let's go to Dosan. We'll find a legal pretext to kill our brother. So Yosef went after his brothers, and he found them in Dosan. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near them, they plotted against him to put him to death. They said to each other, Look, that dreamer is coming. So now come and we'll kill him. Then we'll cast him into one of the pits, and we'll say, A wild beast devoured him. But God said, We are going to see what indeed will become of his dreams. When Reuven heard their plan, he saved Yosef from their hands. He said, Let's not give him a lethal blow. Don't shed blood, Reuven said to them. Throw him into the pit that's in the desert, but don't lay a hand upon him. He said this only in order to save Yosef from their hands, and then he planned to rescue him and return him to his father. Then, when Yosef came to his brothers, they stripped Yosef of his tunic and the fine woolen robe which he had on. They took him and cast him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it, but there were snakes and scorpions in it. They sat down to eat a meal. They glanced around and saw, look, a caravan of Arabs was coming from Gilad. Their camels were laden with spice mixtures, balsam, and birthwort. They were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Yehudah said to his brothers, What profit will we gain if we kill our brother and hide his bloody death? Come, let's sell him to the Arabs and let our own hands not act against him, for he is our brother, our flesh. His brothers listened to him. Meanwhile, another caravan of Midianite men, merchants, passed by. The brothers pulled Yosef and lifted him up from the pit. They sold Yosef to the Arabs for 20 silver pieces, and the Arabs sold him to the Midianites. They brought Yosef to Egypt. Reuven had been tending to his father. He returned to the pit, and look, Yosef wasn't in the pit. He tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, The boy's not there. Where can I go to escape my father's anguish? They took Yosef's robe, slaughtered a young goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They sent the fine woolen coat with messengers who brought it to their father. They said, We have found this. Please, could you identify if this is your son's coat or not? He recognized it, and he said, It's my son's coat. A wild beast has devoured him. Yosef has been ripped apart again and again. Yaakov tore his garments and tied a sackcloth around his waist. He mourned many days for his son. All his sons and all his daughters tried to console him, but he was unable to be consoled. He said, I will go down to my grave while I am still mourning for my son, for I will never be consoled. Yaakov's father, Yitzchak, wept for him. The Midianites sold Yosef to Egypt, to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, chief of the butchers. Yehudah and Tamar. Chapter 38. It was at that time that Yehudah's level of respect from his brothers went down, since they blamed him for not averting the entire incident with Yosef. So he turned away from his brothers and went into partnership with an Adulamite man named Chirah. There Yehudah saw the daughter of a businessman named Shua, and he married her and came to her. She conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him Er. She conceived again and gave birth to a son, and she named him Onan. She bore yet another son again, and she named him Shelah. Yehudah was in Keziv when she gave birth to him. Yehudah took a wife named Tamar for Er, his firstborn. Er, Yehudah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of God, and God made him die. So Yehudah said to Onan, "Come to your brother's wife and enter into levirate marriage, yibum, with her, and raise up children in your brother's name." Onan knew that the children would not be named after him, so whenever he came to his brother's wife, he would waste on the ground, so as not to establish children in his brother's name. What he did was evil in the eyes of God, and he made him die too. Yehudah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Stay as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." Whenever she asked about Shelah, he pushed her off, for he said to himself, "Maybe he'll die too, like his brothers." So Tamar went, and she stayed in her father's house. Many days passed, and Yehudah's wife, Shua's daughter, died. After Yehudah was consoled, he went up to Timnah, both he and his Adulamite friend, to supervise his sheep shearers. Someone reported to Tamar, saying, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." She took off her widow's clothes, covered her head with a scarf, and covered her face. She sat down at the crossroads, which is on the way to Timnah, in order to offer herself to Yehudah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as a wife, and she desired to have children from Yehudah. When Yehudah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she was sitting by the crossroads, and he did not recognize her because she had covered her face. He turned off the road on which he was traveling to the road where she was. He said, "Get ready, please. Let me come to you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me if you come to me?" He said, "I will send a young goat from the herd." "Only if you give me some collateral until you send it," she said. "What collateral should I give you?" he said. She said, "Your signet ring, your cloak, and the staff that's in your hand." He gave them to her, and he came to her. She conceived from him men of similar might and righteousness as Yehudah. She got up and went off. She removed her scarf and put on her widow's clothing. Yehudah sent the young goat through his Adulamite friend to take the collateral from the woman's hand. But he did not find her. So he asked the people of her locality, saying, "Where is the harlot who was at the crossroads on the way?" They said, "There was no harlot here." He returned to Yehudah, and he said, "I have not found her." And the people of the place also said no harlot was here. Yehudah said, "Let her keep them for herself. Otherwise we'll be put to shame if everyone finds out. And I have made every effort to pay her. For, look, I sent this young goat. But you did not find her." Then, after nearly 3 months, someone reported to Yehudah saying, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has acted as a harlot, and look, she is pregnant from harlotry." Yehudah said, "Take her out and let her be burned." She was taken out to be burned. She sent a message to her father-in-law saying, "I am pregnant from the man to whom these belong." She said, "Please identify whose signet ring, cloak, and staff are these." Yehudah recognized them. He said, "She's right in what she says. She became pregnant from me, justifiably, because I did not give her my son Shelah." But he didn't continue to be intimate with her anymore. The birth of Peretz and Zerach. Then when she was giving birth, look, there were twins in her womb. What happened was, when she was giving birth, one baby stretched out his hand. The midwife took a crimson thread and tied it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Then, after the baby brought his hand back inside, look, his brother emerged. She said, "With such strength you have forced yourself, Paratza alecha paretz." So Yehuda named him Peretz. Afterwards, his brother emerged, the one who had the crimson thread on his hand, and he named him Zerach, because of the shining appearance of the crimson. Yosef in Potiphar's house. Chapter 39. Yosef had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, chief of the butchers, a native Egyptian, purchased him from the Arabs who had brought him down there. God was with Yosef, and he became a successful person while he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the name of God was always on his lips, and that whatever he put his hand to, God made successful. Yosef found favor in his master's eyes, and he attended to him personally. Potiphar appointed him over his house, and he gave everything he had into Yosef's hand. What happened was that from the time that he appointed Yosef over his house and over everything he had, God blessed the house of the Egyptian because of Yosef. God's blessing was found in everything he had, in the house and in the field. He left everything he had in Yosef's hand, and he didn't care to know about anything of his except the crumpet that he ate. Since Yosef was in control, he pampered himself so. Yosef had handsome features and a beautiful complexion. God said, "You are pampering yourself while your father mourns. I will incite Potiphar's wife against you." Then after these words of God, his master's wife cast her eyes upon Yosef, and she said, "Sleep with me." But he refused. He said to his master's wife, "Look, my master doesn't care to know about any of my affairs in the house, and he has given everything that is his into my hand. In this house there is no one greater than me, and he has not withheld anything from me except you, since you are his wife. So how could I do this extremely wicked act and sin against God?" When she would speak to Yosef day in and day out, he would not listen to her, even to lie in the same bed as her or to be with her. Then when a certain religious holiday arrived, Yosef came to the house to do his business, and none of the members of the house were in the house, since they had all gone to the temple of idolatry. She grabbed him by his clothes, saying, "Sleep with me." Yosef dashed off and went outside, leaving his clothes in her hand. Then, when she saw that she had left his clothes in her hand and had dashed outside, she called the members of her house and spoke to them, saying, "See, my husband brought us a Hebrew man to deprave us. He came to me to lie with me, but I called loudly. And so when he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, he left his clothes with me and dashed off outside." She left his clothes beside her until Yosef's master came home. Then she told him the same thing, saying, "The Hebrew slave that you brought to us came to me to deprave me, and then when I raised my voice and screamed, he left his clothes with me and dashed off outside." Then, when Yosef's master heard his wife's report which she told him, saying, "Your slave did things like this to me," he became furious. Yosef's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were imprisoned. While he was in prison, God was with Yosef, and he granted him a favorable image and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison's warden. So the prison's warden delivered all the captives that were in the prison into Yosef's hand, and everything that was done there was done through his command. The prison's warden did not see fault in anything that was in Yosef's hands, because God was with him. God made whatever he did successful. Yosef interprets dreams in prison. Chapter 40. Then, after these words of Potiphar's wife, who had badmouthed Yosef throughout Egypt, the attention was taken away from Yosef when the king of Egypt's butler and baker committed an offense against their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh became furious at his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker, and he placed them into the custody of the chief's butcher's house, in the prison where Yosef was held. The chief butcher assigned Yosef to be with them, and he attended to them. They were in custody for many days, a whole year. Both of them, the king of Egypt's butler and baker, who were confined in the prison, had a dream. Each person had his dream on the same night as the other, and each person dreamed his own destiny. Yosef came to them in the morning. He saw them and, look, they were depressed. So he asked these officers of Pharaoh, who were with him in custody in his master's house, saying, "Why do your faces look so down today?" They said to him, "We've had a dream, but there's no one to interpret it." Yosef said to them, "Don't dream interpretations come from God? Please tell me your dreams." The chief butler told his dream to Yosef. He said to him, "In my dream, look, a vine was before me. On the vine there were 3 tendrils. It seemed to be blossoming, and its buds came out. Then its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup. I placed the cup on Pharaoh's palm." Yosef said to him, "This is its interpretation. The 3 tendrils are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will count his officers to serve him at a meal, and he will count your head and restore you to your position. Then you will place Pharaoh's cup into his hand, just like when you were his butler in the first instance. If you would then remember me, alongside you when things go well for you, please do me a favor and mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and I haven't done anything wrong either for them to have put me into prison." The chief baker saw that he had interpreted well, so he said to Yosef, "In my dream, I too was there, and look, there were 3 wicker baskets on my head. In the upper basket was a selection of all of Pharaoh's foods made by a baker, and the birds were eating them from the basket on top of my head." Yosef replied and said, "This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will remove your head from you and hang you on the gallows, and the birds will eat your flesh off you." And so it happened. On the 3rd day, it was Pharaoh's birthday. Pharaoh made a banquet for all his servants, and he counted the chief butler and chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief butler to his position as butler, and the butler placed the cup on Pharaoh's palm, and, just as Yosef had predicted, he hanged the chief baker. But that day the chief butler did not remember Yosef, and he forgot him later on, too. The Jewish Audio Bible is read from the Kol Menachem Chumash, Gutnick edition. To order the print version, please visit www.kolmenachem.com. Also available, Rambam, The 13 Principles of Faith, Slager edition, an accessible exploration into Jewish faith and belief in the Torah. The Kol Menachem Haggadah, the Passover Haggadah with a richly textured commentary which adds layer upon layer of fresh insight to the age-old celebration of our journey from slavery to freedom. And the Kol Menachem Chumash in Hebrew, Vayeishev edition.